Welcome to Season 7 of FYI. This season, instead of tackling topics, we'll discover the most common verbs in the English language. If to be or not to be is the question, then today it's definitely to be. We'll be all that we can be on this week's episode of FYI. Welcome to For Your Info.
En inglés.
You got it. Hello. Welcome to a very special episode. Why? Well, they're all special. But folks, this is the kickoff of Season 7. So FYIers, that's for you. Thank you. We've looked at so many different topics throughout our 6 seasons, and now I decided this 7th season, we're going to get to know the most common verbs in the English language, my amigos, and we're going to get to know them inside and out. So I'll tell you something right now before we begin. If you want to follow along and you want to get all the examples I'm using and have the materials as a study reference, all you have to do is go to patreon.com/Alberto Alonso and you can join my curious community. And that will give you access to a bonus episode every week, which, as you'll see in this week's bonus episode and in every bonus episode in Season 7, we'll do a series of translations at the end, a translation test to make sure you guys got the simple structures as well as the more challenging structures that we look at when we look at each verb. And you'll also get idiomatic expressions and phrasal verbs in the bonus episode, as well as examples of it in movies and music. So what can I say except I'm really excited about this season. I think the content is going to be awesome and very useful for you FYIers. And also, I think the accompanying materials, the PDFs, are going to really help you a lot. And at the end of this season, you'll have PDFs, you'll have your own book that goes into detail with examples of the most common verbs in the English language. And of course, we've got to start with the verb to be. To be or not to be. It's basic. I think it's the most used verb in any language. And in Spanish, you split it in two. It's ser and estar. Ser versus estar. Well, in English, we don't. The difference would be to be bored versus to be boring, por ejemplo. So if you're bored, estás aburrido. If you're boring, eres el que aburre a los demás. The same thing with interested and interesting. That's how we do the ser and estar in English. So to be or not to be, I'm sure you recognize that one. And that also helps us when we're thinking, wait, how do I use the negative of the infinitive? Well, if it's, I told you I'm going to be there, it's, I told you I'm not going to be there. Que no voy a estar ahí. Que no voy a estar presente. So let's start by defining the verb and its uses with some examples. The verb to be functions as a linking verb, as we know. It connects the subject of a sentence with a subject complement. That can be a noun, an adjective, or a prepositional phrase that describes or identifies the subject. It can also be used as an auxiliary verb to form continuous and passive verb tenses. Now, what does that mean? Not really much right now, until we put it into practice. But passive verb tenses, I'm sure you've used them before. You've used the continuous. What are you doing? I'm watching. That's the continuous. So right now it just sounds like a lot of tenses, but don't worry, we're going to break it down. So by the end of these 2 episodes, you will be very familiar with this useful, the most perhaps useful verb in the English language. Let's conjugate it. As always, that's very important. In the present tense, I am, he, she, or it is, they are, we are, You are, you siendo vosotros, y tú. So the past tense is where I've noticed most of my students make mistakes with was and were. And we'll take a look at that a little bit later on. The past participle, everybody seems to know that one. It's been. Let's look at the pronunciation, though, here, because these are words that are very common, but often mispronounced, especially that word is. You don't know how many times I've heard students say is. It's not is, eat, it's is it? Is it? It's not eat these, it's. So that's another thing we're going to focus on here, not just knowing these essential verbs, but also knowing how to say them correctly. Was and were, people don't normally have problems with that one. Been, I've heard some people say vin, I've been. No, I've been. Those B's have to be plosive in English. And the present participle and the gerund form, which are being, el gerundio, as you call it. So let's take a look at some uses with examples. And again, I want you guys to practice aloud. If you're patrons, you have the PDF so you can follow along. But more important than following along visually is following along aloud. So say everything after I say it, not just the translations at the end. So the first one, as we said, is as a linking verb. This describes a state or a condition. For example, in the present, she is happy. Easy, right? But that's not natural. The natural way to say things is to contract them, which is weird because a lot of my students have told me, Alberto, my students told me not to contract. Not my students, my teachers told me not to contract. And I said, well, I want to talk to them right now because when you do not contract, you sound like a parent reprimanding his or her child. Okay, that's what it sounds like to me, at least. So she is happy. Let's contract it. She's happy. She's happy. What about the past tense? They were tired. Estaban cansados. They were tired. No tired, tired. What about to identify a person or a thing? We just looked at the pronunciation of this. This is a book. You can't contract this one. So it's this is, no this is a book. A book. The past tense, that was my friend. There's another one we cannot contract. You see what happened there when I just said we cannot contract? It sounded very harsh. Muy duro, muy severo. Now, a lot of you are also familiar with this verb as an auxiliary verb as well. Let's take a look at it in the continuous tenses. Now, I'm going to say it without contracting it. I want you to contract it. All right. I am reading a book. That's the present continuous. I am reading a book. It's happening right now. Did you say I'm reading a book? Very good. Don't ever say ein. I've heard a lot of students pronounce that M like an N. Remember this, when we pronounce M, our mouth is closed at the end. M. When we pronounce N, our mouth is open at the end. So how would we say it? I want to hear that Think of your favorite food. I'm reading a book. I'm reading a book. The past continuous. She was cooking dinner. Can we contract that one? No. See, it's important to know when you can and can't contract as well. She was cooking dinner, not dinner, dinner. Hay que rematar, hay que pronunciar perfecto. What about future continuous? They will be traveling tomorrow. Can we contract that one? They will be traveling tomorrow. Yes, we can. They'll be, difícil, dilo conmigo, they'll be traveling tomorrow. We can also use it in passive voice constructions. The passive voice. How would we say this? La tarta se está horneando. The cake is being baked. The cake is being baked. Now, can we contract it? You tell me. Absolutely. The cake's being baked. And I want you to listen to that baked too. Even though it's an ED, it's a T sound. Say it with me. The cake's being baked. Is the cake being baked? Remember, anytime we want to make it a little bit harder and also make sure we don't just know that translation, what we do is we put it through the ringer. So let's take this one as an example. The cake is being baked. Afirmamos. Is the cake being baked? Question. The cake isn't being baked. Negative. Indirect question. Do you know if the cake's being baked? And that's how you really know that you know the structure inside and out. And it reminds me of the idiomatic expression you say in Spanish, se lleva la palma. We say it takes the cake. I hope this episode takes the cake. All right, here, let's try this one. La carta fue escrita por él. This is the past passive voice. Again, it's not important what it's called. It's more important that you recognize it and know how to use it. So, la carta fue escrita por él. The letter was written by him. Just be careful. You don't know how many times I've heard students say written. No, it's write, wrote, written. And the best way to practice irregular verbs is every day I write letters or emails. Let's be realistic. Yesterday I wrote an email. And lately, I've written a lot of emails. And patrons, I want you guys to take notes. That's why you have these PDFs. So anything like right there where it says the word baked, ponte una T encima de esa ed. Remember, the idea is to interact with the materials. And if you guys want to do that, as I said, you can get these PDFs by being in my community on Patreon. My students are awesome. I've got to say, I'm proud of each and every one of you. And I know that you're going to make the most of this season 7. And in the bonus part, we're going to put you to the test as well as look at some pop culture. So a nice round of applause for all my patrons. A shout out to my super duper students, Marta, Javier, and Paco. And don't forget about my interstellar students, Carmen, Lina, Isa, Paco, David, Jose Maria, and Edgar. If you guys want to join our curious community and get tons of amazing content to help you really improve your English and get hooked on English, go over to patreon.com/Alberto Alonso or contact me because I'd be more than happy to give you guys a sample, una muestra. I really believe these PDFs are very useful, and we're going to cover the most common verbs. So you really want to get into it. You really want to give it your all this season. Okay, where were we? Toma, otra frase con to be. Y esta suele costar a mis alumnos, ¿eh? A veces digo, ¿cómo se dice? ¿Dónde estábamos? And they go, and they start to stutter. And I say, no, it's where were we? It's almost a tongue twister for my students, but it's a basic sentence, right? Where were you? ¿Dónde estabas? Where were we? Are you repeating aloud? I hope you're repeating aloud. So where were we? We were with existential sentences. And this is to indicate the existence of something, as the name implies. So here we go. Again, I'll give it to you uncontracted so you can hear that verb to be, but then I want you to contract it into natural English. Okay, there is a problem. Casi lo contraio, lo contraigo, because it's difficult for me to not contract them. Okay, so hay un problema. There's a problem, right? There is a problem. Lo contraemos. There's a problem. Let's put it through the ringer. How can you ask me that? Is there a problem? Very good. Tell me que no. There isn't a problem. ¿Y la indirecta, la más difícil? Do you know if there's a problem? If you were able to do all 4 of those for that sentence, great job, amigos. All right, here's another one in the past tense. There were many people at the party. Okay, we don't contract. So that one we don't have to worry about. Well, it's good. It's good that we know when to contract and when not to. There were many people at the party. Había mucha gente en la fiesta. There were many people at the party. Good. Did you say it correctly? Let's make it a question. Were there many people at the party? Yes, there were many people at the party. Dime que no. There weren't many people at the party. Pregúntame si sé. Do you know if there were many people at the party? Are you keeping up? All right, let's go on to questions and negative sentences. All right, ¿vienes? How would you say vienes? Are you coming? Are you coming? Ahí no hay contracción, pero el you lo solemos pronunciar como ya. Are you coming? Are you? ¿Ves cómo no digo you? Are you coming? Y yo me como la G. Americanos nos comemos la G siempre de los gerundios. Are you coming? Yes, I'm coming. Vamos, let's put it through the ringer because this is an easy enough structure that I think everybody should know it. Are you coming? Sí, vengo. Yes, I'm coming. No, no. No, I'm not coming. ¿Sabes si vienes? Do you know if you're coming? All right. Did you get it right? All right, the next one. Was he there? ¿Estuvo él ahí? Was he there? That's the question, right? Can you give me the affirmative? Yes, he was there. Dime que no. He wasn't there. ¿Y la indirecta? ¿Sabes si él estuvo ahí? Do you know if he was there? Now, this one's getting a little bit more difficult, but as you'll see, the episode starts to get a little bit more difficult. And at the end of the episode, we're looking at totally native idiomatic expressions and phrasal verbs as well. All right, let's take a look at a couple negative sentences. No estoy cansado. I'm not tired. No, I'm. Piensa en tu comida favorita. I'm not tired. Pregunta, are you tired? Are you tired? Are you tired? And, ¿cómo diríamos? ¿Sabes si él está cansado? Do you know if he's tired? Acuérdate, el he is, contraemos. Do you know if he's tired? All right, good job. And the last one in questions and negative sentences. I hope you're following along and making your own notes. I'll give you some notes, some guidelines, but of course, you always have to interact with your books. These PDF documents are made to be marked up and written, no written, que lo vimos antes, and written all over. All right, let's try it. No estaban listos. No estaban listos. Contraemos, they weren't ready. They weren't ready. They weren't ready. Pregunta, ¿estaban listos? Were they ready? Were they ready? No, they weren't ready. Yes, they were ready. Pregúntame si sé. ¿Sabes si estaban preparados? Do you know if they were ready? All right, are you keeping up, folks? We're really trying these structures here. We're putting them through the ringer, as we say. Then we've got some conditional usage as well. So how would you say this one? We're going to test not just the verb to be here, but your knowledge of the present conditional. So a hypothetical or unreal situation, just like in Spanish. Yo que tú iría. How do you say that one? Yo que tú iría. If I were you, I would go. If I were you. Now, muchos americanos dirían if I was you. Y técnicamente, si es condicional, siempre es were. It's always were. But you got to convince over 300 million Americans to stop saying it wrong. So again, I usually say was, but when I'm teaching, I tell them, if you're going to take an exam in Cambridge, well, you're going to want to put were because that's the correct form. But I would say if I was you, pero técnicamente es, if I were you, I would go. Can we contract that anywhere? If I were you, I'd go. Eso es, I'd. Muy importante estas contracciones porque las vamos a usar con muchos verbos. If I were you, I'd go. All right, let's try a difficult one. Let's try the past conditional. Okay? Si ella hubiese estado ahí, hubiera ayudado. I don't even know if I said it right in Spanish. You know the one I'm looking for, though. It's a tough one. So, si ella hubiese estado, pues habría ayudado. If she had been there, or she had, lo contraemos, if she'd been there, she would have helped. Y el have se puede pronunciar porque la contracción es apóstrofe VE, right? Pero se pronuncia más como of or a. Escucha, te lo voy a decir de forma natural. And then you say it, repeat after me. If she'd been there, she had, if she'd been there, she would have helped. Would have. Apostrophe VE is of or a. She woulda. She woulda helped. She would have helped. I hope these little tricks and tips are helping you. And what about in imperatives and commands, right? Cállate. Be quiet. Be quiet. How would you say quédate quieto? That's a false friend. It's not quiet. Be still. Be still. What about ten cuidado? Be careful. This is the imperative when we're giving instructions, when we're giving orders. All right, let's take a look at some more examples now. And then we're going to take a look at some synonyms and antonyms, and then we'll wrap up the first part. But just remember, in the second part, if you don't join us, you are going to be missing out because we're going to look at all the different phrasal verbs. We're also going to look at idiomatic expressions, and we'll also have a little test at the end to make sure that you guys got it all and that you are being the best you can be. Oh, and I forgot to tell you about that. In the intro, I said, be all that you can be. That, I think it was the Army or the Navy in the United States. That was their motto, su eslogan. Be all that you can be. All right, so, ¿cómo se dice dónde estábamos? You should know it now. We already looked at it a couple times. ¿Dónde estábamos? Where were we? Where were we? Good job, folks. All right, let's take a look at some examples here just to make sure you guys have got it perfectly. All right, the first one. The sky is blue. Contract it for me. The sky's blue. The sky's blue as a linking verb. The sky's blue. I think that's the usage we see the most. The sky's blue in presente. Let's try one in the past tense. Él era profesor. Él era. He was a teacher. He was a teacher. En presente, he's a. Ahí sí podemos contraer. He's a teacher. He's a. ¿Ves? El a se une con eso. Cuidado, que he oído el error. Muchos dicen, he's teacher. No, en español, soy profe. Él es profe. Pero en inglés hay que poner ese artículo, a or an. He's an astronaut. He's a teacher. ¿Y cómo se hace la pregunta? ¿A qué se dedica? Very important question to know here. You know, you're making friends, you're mingling, mezclando con la gente, and you say, ¿a qué te dedicas? What do you do? Okay, this one doesn't have the verb to be, but I think it's important to know, and we'll look at it when we look at make and do. What do you do, or what do you do for a living? I'm a teacher. He was a teacher. Fijaos en la pronunciación siempre, porque al final, we're not just studying the structures, we're studying how to say the structures, how to feel comfortable saying the structures and recognizing them. And again, you can always come up with your own examples. All right, let's practice a couple in the continuous tense as an auxiliary verb. Ella está corriendo en el parque. Quiero contracciones. Okay. She's running in the park. She's running in the park. All right. Ellos estaban estudiando toda la noche. They were studying all night. Not studying, studying. They were, fíjate, uno la S con el were. They were studying all night. They were. All right. What about in the passive voice as an auxiliary verb? Let's see if you get this one. This is for superstars. La canción se está cantando preciosamente. Okay, so en este momento, so it's the present continuous in the passive voice. I'm trying to give you a little clue. Maybe I've just confused you more. So la canción se está cantando de una manera preciosa. The song is being sung beautifully. Yes, sing, sang, sung. No, I'm not speaking Chinese. I'm telling you how to conjugate the verb to sing. So the song is being sung beautifully. I always call the passive voice the documentary tense, no? El edificio se hizo por, it's that tense. All right, and another one in the passive voice, because again, I think this is one of the more challenging uses. El informe fue escrito ayer. El informe fue escrito ayer. The report was written, no written, yesterday. The report was written yesterday. Did you say it correctly? Nice job. All right. In existential sentences, hay una posibilidad que ganemos. Hay una posibilidad que ganemos. There's a chance, there is, se contrae, there's a chance we might win. We may or we might win, right? Okay, no quedaban asientos disponibles. No quedaban asientos disponibles. There were no seats available. Careful with the pronunciation too. Available. There were no seats available. And you sit in a seat. ¿Ves cómo no se pronuncian igual? We don't say sit down. We say sit. Es ese sonido. Eh. And you guys know it in Spain. You're always saying, ¿qué haces? Well, that's the sound. Sit in your seat. Sit in your seat. Siéntate en tu asiento. All right. ¿Está lloviendo? Here's a question example. ¿Está lloviendo? You shouldn't have to think too much about that one. It's pretty basic. Is it raining? No, isit. Did you say isit? I hope you didn't say isit. Is it raining? Is it? Is it raining? All right. Another question. ¿Estabas en la reunión? ¿Estabas en la reunión? Were you in the meeting or at the meeting? La única que no vale aquí es on. Were you in the meeting? Were you at the meeting? Fijaos, el were apenas lo digo. Were you? Were you? I almost go over it, right? All right, a couple negative sentences. No estoy interesado. I want it to be conjugated. No estoy interesado. I'm not interested. Quiero oír esas M's. I'm not interested. Él no fue invitado. He was not invited. He was not invited. Or, contraemos, he wasn't. He wasn't invited. And conditional sentence. No te voy a dar el pasado because I know that one's difficult. Let's go with the present conditional. Si yo fuera rico, viajaría por el mundo. Si yo fuera rico, viajaría por el mundo. Do you know it? If I were rich, bueno, yo diría if I was rich, pero tú mejor di, if I were rich, I would travel the world, or I would travel around the world. All right, guys. And we'll wrap up with some imperatives, some synonyms, and some antonyms. And I hope you guys will join us in the bonus episode. Remember, all of this is available to you. You can follow along. All right. Imperatives. Be on time. Tienes que estar a tiempo. You have to be on time. Be patient. Be patient. What about this one? Sed consciente. Well, you could say be conscious, but it would be much more common to say be aware instead of be conscious. Be aware. Be aware of your surroundings, for example. It's a very common usage of that. Be aware of your surroundings. All right, and some synonyms to wrap up. We've got exist, right? To be, to exist. René Descartes, I think, therefore I am. Look, there's another very famous idiomatic expression from history which uses the verb to be. Another synonym, seem. He seems happy. Appear, remain, and stay. And antonyms, words that mean the opposite of to be, to exist, to cease. Cease is cesar. Say it with me. Cease. And it reminds me of an idiomatic expression. You never cease to amaze me. Siempre me sorprendes. No dejas de sorprenderme. Die, you know about that one. Stop, disappear, and vanish. And speaking of disappear, we've got to disappear right now. But I really hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope and I know you'll make the most of it. And I hope you guys will join us in the bonus episode on the verb to be. Be there or be square.